Okay, so what I took in Baltimore as my lead-off point, or whatever you want to call it, my instance of social justice was the male-female wage gap. And the male-female wage gap, in the view of most people, is due to sexism. The idea is that most employers are men, and therefore they would have this natural animosity toward women. I tell you, most of the men I know, they don't have an animosity toward women. It's very much the opposite. But according to this theory, you know, we have an animosity toward women, we white males, or males in this case. And what I want to do is show you a cartoon or two that I showed there. The first cartoon is this one. Boy, it's not really as clear as it could be, but is that the best we can do, Clinton? Okay, well, I've got other diagrams that are more intricate than that one, and I'm hoping that I can get a better focus. Okay, so that's one explanation of the male-female income gap. Here's another one. This one I didn't show, but it's, and this one says, I feel like a man trapped in a woman's salary. It's another way of saying the same thing. And here's yet another one, also one that I did not show in Baltimore. And this says there's a state lottery, and this week's... I guess I don't have to explain it. If you have to explain the joke, you're in trouble, you know, so you people are getting the joke, so that's good. The idea here is that the reason females earn less than males, and the illustration I'll be using is 70%, namely a wage gap of 30. It's a little less now, it's more like 25. It keeps changing, but I'm not interested in the slight changes up and down. I'm interested in the fact that there's a significant gap between what males and females earn. And the usual explanation is due to greed or capitalism or male employers or something like that. Women are victims of a wage gap. It's due to patriarchy, sexism, whatever. If we were to put this in terms of supply and demand, it would look like this. Here we have wages and quantity of labor, and the demand curve over here is the demand curve assuming no discrimination. And that's what the wage would be. And there is no discrimination against males, so the wage of males is what it would be with no discrimination. But employers, because they're horrible people, shift their demand curve to the left for women workers, female workers, and thus the demand for female workers is less than it otherwise would be, and that explains why we have the lower wage. Let me give you a few quotes to support this sort of a thing. Women with the university degree earn just $1,600 more a year than men with high school education. Working women who graduated from university earn just $4,000 more annually than men with less than grade 9 schooling. Here's a quote from some famous economist. Quote, jobs held by women are valued less than those held by men, which accounts for the wage gap. That's it. That's the analysis. It doesn't get much deeper than that, but let me read a few more quotes. Here's one that says, the gender wage gap is about 18,000 for university professors. Women academics earn substantially less than their male colleagues, and it goes on to decry this and say this is a horrible thing. Here's another one, bias suggested in women's pay gap. I'm sure that if you had scissors and a little time, you could come up with dozens of things like that just in the last month complaining about this. Here's one from the New York Times given to me by my colleague, Bill Okander. You'll remember this one, Bill? Why is her paycheck smaller? And it has this wonderful graph, and it shows that people women have lower wages in a whole myriad of jobs and occupations. Okay, according to the typical argument, continuing again, this is an inequity. It cries out to the heavens for redress. And what we've got to do is roughly what President Obama is now doing. He's got the EEOC, who is suing, I think it's Walmart, but I presume he'll be suing everybody under the sun, because women make less than men pretty much everywhere, and there'll be a lot of lawsuits. You people in law school will be doing well, and there'll be a lot of money being paid to women for past discrimination. Okay, that pretty much is one side of the case. What's the other side of the case? The other side of the case is a thing called marital asymmetry hypothesis. Namely, marriage has asymmetrical effects on male and female income. Marriage enhances male income and reduces female income, and that's the biggest cause of why men earn more than women. Namely, it's got nothing to do with capitalism, greed, male chauvinist piggery, or whatever. There is an asymmetry. Now, what I'm going to do is take a little survey, and I took this very same survey in Baltimore, so I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to give you three choices. It has to do with household cleaning and cooking and child rearing and getting up at 3 in the morning when the baby is sick and shopping and gardening and all that sort of stuff. Cooking and washing and everything done in the household. And I'll give you three choices. One, the husband does more than the wife. The other, it's roughly equal. And the third, the wife does more than the husband. Now, I want you to, if you're married, answer this in terms of your own marriage. If you're not married, answer this in terms of the marriage with which you're most familiar, presumably your parents' marriage, or if you were brought up by some other couple, well, then their marriage. Okay. And now, if equal, it doesn't have to be 50-50 exactly. It could be, 45 to 55 either way. If it's close, we'll call that equal. Everyone with me? Okay. Raise your hands if the marriage that you're most familiar with, the husband does more of the housework and house cooking and cleaning and stuff like that than the wife. One liar. No, I'm kidding. I don't know you. I assume that you're telling the truth. Okay. But there's only one, and the group is about 100 people or so, give or take, I don't know. But it is a big group, and only one takes that view. The second choice is it's roughly equal, somewhere between 45 and 55. Raise your hand if the marriage that you're involved with is, okay, we've got maybe 15, 20 people? 25? It's hard to tell, and I'm not going to count. But I rely on you to give veracity to my count. There's somewhere around 20 people, 25 people. Now raise your hands if the wife does more than the husband, significantly more. Okay, now we got 80%, 75% of the group. Okay, now when I was in Baltimore, what I said, remember this is right after, what's his name, had won all those swimming medals, Michael Phelps. I try to introduce this concept of alternative or opportunity costs. And I said that whenever you do anything, it always comes at the cost of something, namely other things that you could have been doing that you would have done better or more had you not been doing the first thing. So I said that Michael Phelps is probably not a world-class cellist. Why? Because in order to be a world-class cellist, you've got to play the cello, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 hours a day. And if you're in the pool 6, 8, 10 hours a day, they don't allow cellos in the pool. It gets the rosin, it's all messed up. You just can't do it, or you can't be as good a cellist as you would otherwise be had you not done the swimming. Now, maybe he's a decent cellist, but I guarantee he'd be a way better cellist if he didn't, swim around all the time. I gave the same example. I was on this is a little off the Baltimore thing, but later on I was on this black radio show, and I gave the same thing with LeBron James. I said, I'll bet you LeBron James is not a great flute player. And I was accused of being a racist for that. And I said, it's got nothing to do with racism. I'm just trying to illustrate alternative costs and opportunity costs. And LeBron is, dunking basketballs. He's not playing the clarinet or the flute or anything. So obviously he can't be as good a flute or clarinet player as he would be if he paid attention to that instead of dunking the basketball and jumping 50 feet in the air and, the way he does. It's just a basic element of economics, and if you don't like this sort of a thing, probably you shouldn't major in economics. But all this is really common sense. Let me give you another example. Bill Barnett and I can each run a mile in, well, when we were young, we could maybe do 5 minutes, but now, say 10 minutes. We can each run a mile in 10 minutes. And right before the race, what I do is I give him this briefcase, which weighs, 30 pounds. And now we start running. And before, we were equally able to run. And now, of course, I'm going to beat him. because he's got this extra burden. Well, so is it with men and women. Men and women, in this century at least, are equally productive in the marketplace. Not so in the 19th century or the 18th century before, because then a lot of the jobs required upper body strength. And, to knock down a tree or to dig a hole to put in a building or things like that took brute strength. You were doing this with pick and shovel. But nowadays, the way you do it is with a button. So women and men now have equal productivity. Not so in previous centuries. Then men had more productivity in most jobs because a lot of jobs required physical skills, and like it or not, men are bigger and stronger than women are. It's just the fact. But nowadays, men and women are equally productive. They've got roughly the same abilities on average. But when they're married, they're taking on this extra responsibility. It's as if they're carrying an extra 50 pounds on them in the race. The story is the husband and the wife, they both have a PhD in chemistry and they both work in the lab. And now they come home at 6 o'clock, and what does the husband turn around and say to the wife? "What's the dinner, dear?" Now, they've both been working all day. They both have the same PhD. They both have the same accomplishments. But if she's making the dinner, well, then this is a little uneven. What is he doing while she's making the dinner? Maybe he's studying. Maybe he's having recreation. I'm not sure. And when she has kids, forget it. If she was taking 60 or 70% of the household before the kids, she's taking way more when there are kids. And apart from breastfeeding, which obviously only she can do, women are much more involved in kids, and I'll get into that a little bit later. It's got nothing to do with sexism or anything. It's just a fact of nature that if you give one group a burden, one group who are otherwise equal, you give them extra housekeeping, well, something's got to suffer, like Michael Phelps, like LeBron James. Men pay more in car insurance rates. Got nothing to do with sexism. It's just because men have a worse record in getting into crashes. That's the way the market works. Men pay more for life insurance because they have a lower life expectancy. This would be the opposite of the sexist thing. I'm trying to say it's not sexism, it's just the market. It's just cost and productivity and things like that. Okay. Has any of this changed? People say, well, Block, you're dated. Yes, it was true a while ago that there was an unfair division of household and child-rearing tasks between men and women, although I just took this 5 minutes ago, this survey. Here's what professional sociologists have to say. Quote, to their surprise, the sociologists discovered that the social and economic gains won by so many American women during the past decade have had remarkably little effect on the traditional gender roles assumed by the more than 3,600 married couples in their study. Although 60% of the wives had jobs, only about 30% of the husbands believed both spouses should work, and only 39% of wives thought so. No matter how large their paycheck, the working wives were still almost entirely responsible for the couple's housework. Husbands so hated housework, the researcher found, that wives who asked them to help out could sometimes sour the marriage. This isn't me speaking, this is sociologists. And, a synonym for sociologists is socialists. I'm kidding. There are a few free enterprise sociologists, so I'm just kidding. Got to keep it alive here. Here's another one. Experts say that the toughest occupation may still be that of working mom. Many women who are bringing home the bacon are still expected to fry and serve it too. Notice how clever that is. There really are relatively few couples where child care and domestic work are truly shared, says a psychologist at the Manager Clinic. Even unemployed husbands do no more than 36% of the housework. Now that's a study in high stress and high shame. Notice the value judgment here. I give no value judgment. I'm just saying this is the fact. Later I'll say why it has to be that way biologically. Here's another one. Home status for career women. The people in the front of the room can verify that this is correct. Home status for career women, same even if pay high, study says. Okay. More sociological insights. Here is promotion-seeking behavior in an XYZ industry. The industry was, what's the word, anonymously done. but it was reported in a book that I edited. And if you want any of these citations, please get hold of me later. What we're saying is that males have higher motivation to get a raise. Why? Because if you get a raise, then if the machinery breaks down at 3 in the morning, you got to get in there. And if you've got kids to take care of, you can't. So more men are trying to get these promotions. And especially with regard to married people, the difference is very big among married people. Here's some more evidence, if you will. Occupational primacy in this XYZ industry. Would you give up your job if a spouse's job required a move? 4% of the men said yes, and 53% of the women said yes. Spouse would give up job if respondent's job required a move. 92% of the men said yes, only 55% of the women. Respondent's job more important, spouse's job more important. You get the idea. And this is yet another reason why the male-female income ratio is the way it is, and it's got nothing to do with sexism or any of that capitalism stuff. It comes from the fact of unequal job sharing. It comes from the fact, let's talk about the pink-collar ghetto for a while. If you know that you're going to have 3 kids, and you're going to be out of the labor market from the day that the first kid is born, and you space them every 3 years, and you're going to be out of the labor market or only in it part-time until the last kid is 6 or 7 and can go to school full-time, 9 to 3, well, that's 10 or 15 years or 12 years, depending upon how you space the babies. Is it sensible to go into an industry where the human capital will atrophy, where there are discoveries every day, and if you're out for 12 years or only in part-time for 12 years, you're going to lose a lot? No, you don't go into computers, you don't go into physics, you don't go into chemistry where things change. Rather, you go into nursing or being a secretary or a nurse or things like that. And it just so happens that those professions or occupations pay less. But again, this is not due to the market. This is a rational development on the part of people who want to maximize their lifetime earnings. Okay, I've now given you the case. Is this better? I've now given you the case for thinking that there's nothing untoward going on. It's not evil capitalism. It's not discrimination. It's just due to choices, voluntary choices of men and women. And I'm now going to offer you 2 proofs or bits of evidence or something like that to buttress this. The first one is logic. I wish I could make this better. Maybe that's better. Now, I'm going to assume that the men and the woman each have a productivity of $10 an hour. And I'm going to assume, what the hell did I do? That should be a 7. This is all Bill Barnett's fault. I told him to do it. You can't get good help nowadays. That should be $7. Why 7? Because the male-female wage ratio is 70%, or the gap is 30%, or at least those are the numbers I'm using to illustrate this. So I'm assuming that you have an equally productive male and an equally productive female, and that the male's wage is $10 an hour and the woman's wage is $7 an hour. And I say to you that profit is the difference between productivity and wage, and that you earn 0 profit off the male, which is okay in equilibrium. In equilibrium, there are no profits. But you earn $3 an hour. See, I got the 7 correct down there, or Bill did. He just missed it up there. Now, I ask, is this sustainable? And the answer is nonsense. This is the feminist view. This is what people who say that there is a male-female gap and it's due to something untoward, that's what they're saying. They're saying that the male and the female are equally productive, which I'm willing to grant on average, men and women are equally productive. And they're saying that the male wage is 30% higher, or the gap is 30 cents or $3 an hour, which means, if it means anything, that you can earn a lot of profit off of a female. A female is if has a little sign on a lapel, hire me and make an extra $3 an hour. Right? Isn't that what that means? Isn't that the logic of the argument? That if you hire a woman under these strange circumstances, you make an extra $3 an hour. That's not sustainable. If you can make more money hiring a woman, and I'm a male chauvinist pig and I refuse to have anything to do with women, I don't want to hire them, they should be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, the whole business, I don't want to have anything to do with them, I'll go broke. I'll go broke because my competitors will say, I don't care, women, men, I'm just discriminating in favor of the color green as in money. And I'm going to hire the woman and underprice you and drive you out of business, you rascal. Now, I don't say that there's no such thing as sexism, or later on I'll get to racism, but I say that the market stops this. The market is the solution to the problem of sexism. If there is any in the first place, which there isn't. But if there were, the market would tend to drive it away. Will it always succeed fully? No. We're never at equilibrium. But there's always market forces grinding away at people who hire higher-priced workers when they could have got equally productive lower-priced workers. It's just not sustainable. Now, some people are convinced by the logic. Other people, logic schmogic. Let's talk about a little empirical evidence here. What's going on here? What's going on here is if you want to test, and I don't like these words, they're based on neoclassical economics. I'm an Austrian, so I don't go for testing, I don't go for evidence. This is an illustration. But if you wanted to test this, what you would do, or if you want to illustrate this, better said, what you would do is, remember, my thesis, not original with me, but the thesis that I'm articulating is that it's due to marital asymmetry. It's the marital asymmetry hypothesis. So what you do is you take people who have never been married, and you look at the male-female ratio of people who have never been married, and you come up in Canada in 93. It's the same thing for the last 20 years, and I'll show you a diagram to prove that, and it's the same thing in Canada. I just happened to be in Canada when I did this. The ratio is 99.2. Now I tell you, when you get 99.2, that's unity. I mean, when you deal with statistics, you never get exact perfection. The statistics are a little wonk. I mean, it's the government who's collecting them. How much can you trust government statistics? But even on their own bloody statistics, there's no wage gap. Whereas the wage gap for the ever married is gigantic. And the point is that there are more ever marrieds than never marrieds. And what I mean by never married is never married. Not married and then divorced or separated or widowed or anything like that. And it's very difficult to get these census people to talk about never married status. They only talk about singles. Sometimes you get it, but you have to like pull teeth to get it. My co-author and I were in a competition with Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell, about whom I'll have a lot more to say later, as to who could get a higher ratio for females to males. And I think we beat them. We got 109.8. Namely, females were higher than males by 9.8%. But you see, in statistics, what you're going to get is somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2. It'll vary. You never get pure 1.00 wage gap. You just don't get that. Anyone who's dealt with statistics knows that it's not a perfect thing like the logic that I just gave before. Looking at the other one there, you get a 93.4 for the never marrieds. And then what we did is we took age as a proxy for marital status, and we said, well, people between 16 and 24 probably have never been married, or at least very few of them have been married, and we look at the ratio, and we find 94.8, which again is virtually no gap. So if those of you who don't like the logic, maybe will like the statistics. See, this is a very telling thing, because according to the marital asymmetry hypothesis, it's very easily understandable. If you're married, the woman makes less because she's got more of a care, more of a weight on her back in the race. If you're unmarried, or between 16 and 24, which is a proxy for being unmarried, it's roughly equal. It ranges from 0.8 to 1.2, up and around that range. Namely, there's no gap. It's very incompatible with the other hypothesis. I mean, the other hypothesis said you know, all women, because of their biology or their plumbing, we're against them. But why would there be such a gigantic difference between ever and never marrieds? There wouldn't be on their theory. So their theory is got problems. Here's another one. Another implication of this is that there are certain industries where there is a disproportionate number of females in them. Think banking, insurance, law, things like that. And there are others, mining, farming, where it's mostly men. And according to that, according to the other theory, there should be bigger profits in the area where there are females. But if there are bigger profits in the area where there are females in those industries, well then capital would tend to move out of the male areas and into the female areas because there'd be higher profits. So again, this is a very untenable, unsustainable hypothesis, and I think we have to reject that hypothesis. Here's another one where you standardize for children, and you can see when there are children in the picture, the ratio goes down because children are more of a burden on the mother. I don't say a burden in a bad sense. These are ideas that are voluntarily taken upon. I'm just saying that if you're looking at productivity in the market and they have children, well, other things equal, children will lower your productivity in the market because children are a pain in the neck. I mean, you know, they take a lot of time. And here is that diagram where I was going to show you that nothing changes. The ratios are the same. This is 1941, 51, 61, 71, 81. I haven't done it recently, but the ratios are about the same. You can see that this one up here is the never marrieds, and this is the all, and this is the never married, the ever married. You get that? So it's a flat kind of a thing. Nothing changes. This is based on biology or sociology or something, and nothing changed in 50 years, and I don't think anything ever will change. There'll always be a female-male wage gap, and it's got nothing to do with capitalism. Okay, that's the end of my first subject, the male-female income gap. I'm now going to be a little bit more radical, and I'm going to talk about the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is much more radical, and then I'm going to get into the racism stuff, which is even more radical than that. So hold on to your hats or your seats or whatever you're supposed to hold on to. Okay, what's going on here? What is a glass ceiling? Well, a glass ceiling is the idea that women can rise, but they sort of get stuck right there. And right there is not the president, it's sort of the vice president. Right? They can get up there, but they can't really get up to the male level. There's a glass ceiling keeping them down. When Hillary was running for president, people were talking about the glass ceiling. Although in politics, there was Indira Gandhi, there was Golda Meir, there was Margaret Thatcher. There were a few. But if you look at how many prime ministers or presidents of countries there have been, you can name them on the fingers of one hand. And this is for the last, I don't know, throughout all history. And we've got 200 or 300 countries for many, many years, and you can only name 4 or 5. That's a glass ceiling. So even though a woman sometimes can get up there, we would count that as a glass ceiling. Okay? It doesn't have to be a perfect glass ceiling. By and large, women are prevented from getting to the very tippy top. Now, there are various theories as to why this should be. And the leftist theory or the feminist theory or the incorrect theory is that it's due to the usual standbys, the usual thing, you know, it's a male plot, it's patriarchism or whatever. I want to offer a very different theory. But in order to introduce this theory, I now have to talk about a thing called sociobiology, sometimes called evolutionary psychology by wimps who refuse to call it by its original name because it's politically incorrect, but it means the same thing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about sociobiology. What's going on here? Sociobiology is the theory that we are the way we are now because of what it took to survive 1 million years ago when we were in caves or in trees. That's the theory. If something kept us alive as in the trees or in the caves 1 million years ago, then the people who did that could leave progeny, and they're our grandparents, and that's why we are the way we are. Let me give you an example. We are the species that doesn't like babies crying and loves babies smiling. I mean, a lot of advertisements pull at our heartstrings because, you see a baby smiling, you go, oh, isn't that cute? You see a baby crying, you don't really like that. Now, we're not talking about a few sociopaths, but the average person just doesn't like babies crying and loves babies smiling. And isn't that cute? That bit. Well, suppose there were two species back then, 1,000,000 years ago, in the trees or in the caves, and they were exactly alike. Ceteris paribus, other things equal, exactly alike. They had the same opposable thumb, they had the same brain capacity, they had the same speed, they had the same ability to hunt, to evade predators. Everything was the same, except that group didn't give a rat's rear end about babies, and we did. Now, which group is more likely to survive and prosper and continue the gene pool down into the present day? Obviously, this is a no-brainer. If you don't care about babies, if you don't care whether they cry or not, you're not going to take care of them and you're not going to survive. Does everyone see that? Let me give you another one. How many people here are afraid of snakes? What did Indiana Jones do in that movie where they were guarding the treasure? They had snakes all around, right? How many people here are afraid of bathtubs? Nobody. Milton Friedman, by the way, was killed by a bathtub. He was. He was 93 and he slipped in the bathtub and he hit his head on the side of the bathtub, and when they took him to the hospital, he passed away. Bathtubs kill many, 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 many more people nowadays than snakes. And yet we're all afraid of snakes and not bathtubs. Why? According to sociobiology, back then there were no bathtubs, so you weren't selected for fear of bathtubs. It had no survival value. But you were selected for fear of snakes. If you didn't fear snakes, you're not going to leave as many progeny around as people who did fear snakes. That's why we fear snakes. Because our grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents to the nth degree, snake fearing was a survival thing way back then, whereas bathtub fearing wasn't. So we're hardwired to fear snakes, not bathtubs. Now let's talk about Katrina. In the aftermath of Katrina, the prices of flashlight batteries, most of you were there, flashlight batteries, gasoline, water, milk, orange juice, rose through the roof. Rose through the roof. Why? Because, supply shifted to the left and demand, supply shifted to the left. There was very little of it. Prices rose. Governor Blanco said, this is price gouging, and we're going to put the price gougers in jail, and everyone was applauding. Yay, yay, put them in jail. Why is this? You see, we as economics students all know that what the function of a higher price is like a call for help in the wilderness. When the price rises, there are two motives that people have to come and ship things toward New Orleans. One is benevolence, but you can only rely on benevolence so far. Benevolence is limited. The other one is self-interest, and Adam Smith had a lot to say about self-interest in The Invisible Hand. Well, a high price means high profits, and people now have not only a benevolent incentive, but a profit incentive to bring stuff from Tennessee and Alaska or wherever it is, Mexico, bring it here to make the profits. And as they bring it here, the price comes down. So what the price is sort of like a signaling device. But we're not hardwired to appreciate that. There was none of this market stuff 1,000,000 years ago. 1,000,000 years ago, the only way we could help each other was explicitly. You're sick this week, I'll help you. I'm sick next week, you help me. Right? People who didn't do that didn't get self-selected to live. So we don't need good Samaritan laws. If we see someone drowning or by the road, we help them. The natural inclination is to help, as shown by the fact that there are still people coming down here to New Orleans to help us, volunteers to fix our houses and stuff. We all, except for a few sociopaths, and even the sociopaths, I don't much like Hitler and Stalin. They were bad guys. But the way I sort of come to grips with them is I say, maybe their genes were necessary to keep the human race alive 1,000,000 years ago, because you need real vicious people to deal with the lions and the tigers then. I don't know if it helps you, but somehow it helps me reconcile the fact that we have mass murderers and rapists and other bad guys out there. Maybe it's sociobiological. They say to understand is to forgive. Well, maybe to understand is to not let it bother us so much that there are bad people out there. I don't know if that helps, and it's a little off the point. Let me get back to sociobiology. Another example. Take this feminist nonsense where they talk about, Amazons. The Amazon women, they were tough, they were ready to kick butt, and, Suppose there was another group, just like us, same opposable thumbs, same head space, same brain, same ability in every which way, only they were Amazons, and we were patriarchs. This is why we have patriarchy, not matriarchy. They were matriarchs. Well, what does a matriarch do? In the matriarch tribe, what the women do is they go out and hunt. And when the saber-toothed tiger comes a-calling at the cave, it's the women that come out and meet him, and the men stay in the back of the cave where it's safer. Now let me tell you a little bit about the birds and the bees. The farmer keeps 1 bull and 50 cows. He doesn't keep 50 bulls and 1 cow. Why? Because 1 bull can do the business. You don't need the other 49. The other 49 are good cannon fodder. But you don't really need them. Look, in World War II, Germany and Russia kicked the crap out of each other. At the end of that war, there were hardly any men between the ages, 15 and 60, who were around and capable of doing the business. And yet the next generation is as if they never disappeared. Imagine if the war was fought by women. And now there was no woman between the age of 15 and 40 alive. Would there be a next generation in Germany and Russia? No. Women or female cows are the limitation on biology, not men. Men are good cannon fodder. We're not needed that much. Women are the precious commodity, biologically speaking. So if you had this tribe that were matriarchs and Amazons and the women were fighting, well, do you think they're going to last? No. If the women, just like the Germany and the Russia case where the women fought, this other tribe would not exist. The reason we're patriarchal is because we're descended from a bunch of people who sent the cannon fodder men out to fight and do the hunting, which was more dangerous than the berry picking. Okay, I've now introduced sociobiology. I now want to introduce something else, and a lot of people are going to boo. It's called the normal curve, and remember at the beginning of my talk I said if you can't talk about these things, how can we solve any problems? So please bear with me, don't boo too harshly. I'm going to use a normal curve, and here are 2 normal curves. The top one is men. The bottom one, wait, do I have that? The top one is men and the bottom one is women. This is my freehand drawing of it. Here is a real one, an honest, a good, actual bell curve. But what it shows is that, let me put it this way because I think you can illustrate it more easily, that women are God's or nature's or biology's insurance policy. They're all clumped toward the middle, whereas men are God or nature or whoever you believe is responsible for this stuff, crapshoot. The women are all bunched toward the middle, the men are all over the lot. Now, let's look at this end A and B. If you were to go to mental institutions, who would you find in mental institutions? Virtually all men. Namely, at that many standard deviations below the mean, where mental institution types hang out, virtually all men. Oh yeah, there's a few Lizzie Bordens, there might be 1 or 2 crazy women, but most of them, pardon to Thomas Oz, my buddy, most people in mental institutions are men. If you look at homeless people, yes, there's a woman who's homeless, but it's virtually all men. If you look in prisons, you go to the prison. My colleague Dan D'Amico is an expert in the economics of prisons. He can attest that virtually all prisoners are men. Oh, there's a few women, but 95, 98% of all inmates are men. If you go to the graveyard, okay, well there it'll even out. But if you go to the graveyard and look at people who died before their time, say 40 years or younger, all men, virtually all men, I'm exaggerating. Well, look, if we're going to have a normal curve which is symmetrical, and you have a preponderance of men at A and women at B, well, then you have to have the same preponderance of men at C and women at D. Namely, out there on the right tail. The men also have to outnumber the women. If you look at Nobel Prize winners, except in wussy areas like poetry where they'll give it based on God knows what, the award. But if you look at math or economics or medicine or biology or chemistry or the Fields Medal in math, it's all men. Because when you get into 3 and 4 standard deviations above the mean, there are no women. Virtually. Virtually no women. In chess, grandmasters, it used to be, I follow chess, I play it a little bit. I'm a little bit better than a wood pusher. I have an 1800 rating, which is sort of pathetic, but at least I know the moves. It used to be that out of the 500 top chess grandmasters, there was one woman. Then came the Polgar sisters, P-O-L-G-A-R. These were phenomenal women. There were 3 Hungarian women. And the worst of them was ranked 300, and the next one was ranked 200, and the best one, Judith Polgar, was ranked like 35th. And this was amazing, because before that, there was never any chess grandmaster. Now, chess doesn't take any upper body strength. But when you're talking 4 standard deviations above the mean, or 3 standard deviations above the mean, you're going to get a Polgar sister every once in a rare while. That's why we have a glass ceiling. Now, there are sociobiological reasons why it has to be this way and it can't be the other way. Suppose it were the other way. Suppose that it was the females that were God's crapshoot and the males were all toward the middle. Well then, the people at B are incapable of bearing children. They're too busy being the long historical equivalents of people being in the jails or in the mental institutions or that. Again, if there were 2 societies equally able in every other way, only one was ours and the other was this other society where the bell curves were inverted, we'd beat them out. That's why we're here, because we beat them out, if ever there were any. This is sociobiological theory. So, again, the fact that, oh, here's one more I forgot to give. I must do this. Here's this thing from USA Today, and it goes 40-0. 5 actresses face down the big 40. This is 3 or 4 years ago. We're talking about Meg Ryan, Susan Sarandon, Julia Roberts, Naomi Watts, Halle Berry, Catherine Zeta-Jones. And what it says is, Nicole, Naomi, Catherine, Halle, and Julia could force Hollywood to grow up. Now what does this mean? What this means is that when a woman turns 40 or 45, she no longer gets the ingenue roles. She no longer gets the role of sex goddess or whatever. Now she gets the role of mother, right? Or big sister or something like that. Why is this? Is this Hollywood sexism? Let's go back to sociobiology. Suppose that there were 2 societies, one like ours, where you look at a 20-year-old girl and say, whoop-de-doo. Most guys do that. I hate to clue you in, but that's what they do. That's our society. But in this other society, they see a 65-year-old woman, they say, oh, wow, got to get that 65-year-old woman. Oh, here's a 20-year-old, oh, not ripe yet. Now, what prognostication do you people have for such a society? They're not going to have many babies, right? Because getting back to the birds and the bees, when you're over 40, you can't have kids anymore. And societies that revere the sexuality of women that are 50 and 60, look, they look pretty good to me. I'm 67. These women are 45. They look pretty good. But a society based on that will not survive. Our society beat them. Let me give you one more example. There was this case where 2 actors, very, very good-looking actors, but not famous, actors as good-looking as George Clooney, Tom Cruise, and Robert Pattinson. I don't know who these people are, but somebody said that they're the sex role models. On the one hand, and Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, and my favorite, Marilyn Monroe, which dates me a little bit. Two very good-looking actors, a male actor and a female actor. They were given the same script and let loose on a college campus, and the script was, and they would each go up to a member of the opposite sex, and they'd say, "Hey, I've got this motel room over there. How'd you like to spend 2 hours with me doing what comes naturally?" Guess what the results were? The woman got about 98% yeses. The man got 2 or 3. Why is this? Well, sociobiology. Women have only got eggs from age, 14 to 38 or so, times 12 is a couple of hundred eggs. Men have got a lot more sperm than that. Men are much more willing to give them out indiscriminately, to share them because they're cheaper, because you've got a lot more chances at life than women do. Just biology. This sociobiology explains a lot of male-female interactions. It's based on biology. It's not based on capitalism or anything like that. It applies in every culture. I mean, in the communist culture, I'm sure that the 50-year-old women were not the sex goddesses. Okay. Okay, according to the typical argument, continuing again, this is an inequity. It cries out to the heavens for redress. And what we've got to do is roughly what President Obama is now doing. He's got the EEOC who is suing, I think it's Walmart, but I presume he'll be suing everybody under the sun because women make less than men pretty much everywhere. And there'll be a lot of lawsuits. You people in law school will be doing well. And there'll be a lot of money being paid to women for past discrimination. Okay, that pretty much is one side of the case. What's the other side of the case? The other side of the case is a thing called marital asymmetry hypothesis. Namely, marriage has asymmetrical effects on male and female income. Marriage enhances male income and reduces female income. And that's the biggest cause of why men earn more than women. Namely, it's got nothing to do with capitalism, greed, male chauvinist piggery, or whatever. There is an asymmetry. Now, what I'm going to do is take a little survey, and I took this very same survey in Baltimore, so I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to give you 3 choices. It has to do with household cleaning and cooking and child rearing and getting up at 3 in the morning when the baby is sick and shopping and gardening and all that sort of stuff. Cooking and washing and everything done in the household. And I'll give you 3 choices. 1, the husband does more than the wife. The other, it's roughly equal. And the third, the wife does more than the husband. Now, I want you to, if you're married, answer this in terms of your own marriage. If you're not married, answer this in terms of the marriage with which you're most familiar, presumably your parents' marriage, or if you were brought up by some other couple, well, then their marriage. Okay. And now, if equal, it doesn't have to be 50-50 exactly. It could be, 45 to 55 either way. If it's close, we'll call that equal. Everyone with me? Okay. Raise your hands if the marriage that you're most familiar with, the husband does more of the housework and house cooking and cleaning and stuff like that than the wife. One liar. No, I'm kidding. I don't know you. I assume that you're telling the truth. Okay. But there's only one, and the group is about 100 people or so, give or take. I don't know, but it's a big group, and only one takes that view. The second choice is it's roughly equal, somewhere between 45 and 55. Raise your hand if the marriage that you're involved with is, okay, we've got maybe 15, 20 people, 25. It's hard to tell, and I'm not going to count. But I rely on you to give veracity to my count. There's somewhere around 20 people, 25 people. Now raise your hands if the wife does more than the husband, significantly more. Okay, now we got 80%, 70%. Okay, so what I took in Baltimore as my lead-off point, or whatever you want to call it, my instance of social justice was the male-female wage gap. And the male-female wage gap, in the view of most people, is due to sexism. The idea is that most employers are men, and therefore they would have this natural animosity toward women. I tell you, most of the men I know, they don't have an animosity toward women. It's very much the opposite. But according to this theory, we have an animosity toward women, we white males, or males in this case. And what I want to do is show you a cartoon or two that I showed there. The first cartoon is this one. Well, it's not really as clear as it could be, but is that the best we can do, Clinton? Okay. Well, I've got other diagrams that are more intricate than that one, and I'm hoping that I can get a better focus. Okay, so that's one explanation of the male-female income gap. Here's another one. This one I didn't show, but it's, and this one says, I feel like a man trapped in a woman's salary. It's another way of saying the same thing. And here's yet another one. Let me give you a few quotes to support this sort of a thing. Women with the university degree earn just $1,600 more a year than men with high school education. Working women who graduated from university earn just $4,000 more annually than men with less than grade 9 schooling. Here's a quote from some famous economist. Quote, jobs held by women are valued less than those held by men, which accounts for the wage gap. That's it. That's the analysis. It doesn't get much deeper than that, but let me read a few more quotes. Here's one that says, the gender wage gap is about 18,000 for university professors. Women academics earn substantially less than their male colleagues, and it goes on to decry this and say this is a horrible thing. Here's another one, bias suggested in women's pay gap. I'm sure that if you had scissors and a little time, you could come up with dozens of things like that just in the last month complaining about this. Here's one from the New York Times given to me by my colleague, Bill Okander. You'll remember this one, Bill? Why is her paycheck smaller? And it has this wonderful graph, and it shows that people women have lower wages in a whole myriad of jobs and occupations. So one that I did not show in Baltimore. And this says there's a state lottery, and this week's... I guess I don't have to explain it. If you have to explain the joke, you're in trouble, you know, so you people are getting the joke, so that's good. The idea here is that the reason females earn less than males, and the illustration I'll be using is 70%, namely a wage gap of 30. It's a little less now, it's more like 25. It keeps changing, but I'm not interested in the slight changes up and down. I'm interested in the fact that there's a significant gap between what males and females earn. And the usual explanation is due to greed or capitalism or male employers or something like that. Women are victims of a wage gap. It's due to patriarchy, sexism, whatever. If we were to put this in terms of supply and demand, it would look like this. Here we have wages and quantity of labor, and the demand curve over here is the demand curve assuming no discrimination. And that's what the wage would be. And there is no discrimination against males, so the wage of males is what it would be with no discrimination. But employers, because they're horrible people, shift their demand curve to the left for women workers, female workers, and thus the demand for female workers is less than it otherwise would be, and that explains why we have the lower wage.